Brooke, I'm so thrilled to have you in this space with me today and just feeling so timely based on our work together. You and I'm journeying with you one-on-one, which I'm so grateful for and so excited about. And it's brought up a lot for me, but just connecting back to how we met. And, there's never any accidents in the realm of consciousness and spirit. And so we met at Pacifica, which had you ever been there before that? Was that your first time there?
It was my first time.
Yeah, me too. Were you just like blown away by all the Marion Woodman meets Carl Jung meets who is the lady? Oh, Maureen Murdoch. So that's how I first saw you, met you. We were both there taking a Writing Down the Soul Memoir course, and I was just struck with your presence. Um, I don't even know how old you are, and you don't have to say, but I knew you're a lot younger than I am, but you just held this like wise presence. And you mentioned in your introduction that you were studying the Priestess. And I think you mentioned the Delphi Oracle and all of those things. And I'm like, wow, she's cool. And I was so intrigued by it. And then you and I caught each other. I don't know if it was that day or another day. And you had mentioned to me about Jemana Sophia, who I later went through her mystery school. So you've actually been a pivotal little player on opening me to the Priestess and understanding the validity and the veracity really of what that means in our day. So that said, you'd probably like to get a word in edgewise here. Tell us how this path found you and how you would identify even what, or even just delineate for us what a priestess is and what an oracle is as you're working that into, your story.
Beautiful. Well, like the initiation on the Pacifica campus, that felt like a homecoming. The priestess, tuning in, realizing the priestess within, and then going on this mythic heroine type of journey to
was it not just
her. Yes.
Did everything come down for you after that like it did for me? Dark night stuff.
Yes, I had begun astrologically my study sati, which is a very, very important transit, which actually prompted me to study Vedic astrology. I was in the beginning of my study sati, which is the 7.5-year transit of Saturn to your natal moon sign. That's your natal birth sign moon. And this period is described as a karmic knot. It's described as losing the ones that once cared for you. And it can also influence all these other parts of your life in so many earth-shaking, groundbreaking ways. And so I was beginning, the very beginning of my study sati. Then everyone has a study sati, most likely, if they move into, young adulthood, and many people have 2. And if we're blessed enough, we have 3. It just depends on what time you were born at. And I didn't know that at the time, but I like to frame my priestess awakening in this astrological lens because of my practice now as a Vedic astrologer and priestess, and how just following the soul threads, asking why, asking how, asking please reveal more to me, great mother, great mystery, and trust, right? Just trusting.
Trust is massive.
The whispers and just saying yes to it, even if it feels like the most irrational, non-linear thing to do. It's very much the oracle path is that instinctual path. It's receiving the intuition. It's not denying the intuition or putting it on the mantle for a later day. It is fully integrating it as soon as possible and taking action on it so the energy can be flowing, it can be moving through you. It's something I wish I knew as an artist in my younger days of just
for sure. No kidding.
Digesting and processing and expressing and just moving through it and trusting that whereas either the imposter syndrome, the imposter complex, the writer's block, whatever that is, that was so much a part of my narrative before I awokened.
Or as my kids say, before I got woke.
Yes. So yes, how I found the priestess was I had a vision. I did. I received a vision of a Black woman, and I had no idea what the Black Madonna was. I had no idea who Kali was in the Hindu pantheon, a great goddess. And so I just received this image of this Black woman, and I got the message that she was God in my meditation. And I was sitting in my 3rd floor apartment in Chicago with the busiest street at the time. I had just started my first psychic healing class. It wasn't a Reiki class. It was specifically for developing your clairvoyance and psychicism. So I was developing not just meditation practices that I've already been doing, more of the yogic tradition, but I was doing the visualization practices, which were the game changers for me. So in this practice, I received this message from the goddess, and I didn't know about the goddess. I had
were you raised in any kind of religious tradition, or was that part of you? Was it on your MO? Was it kind of like your MO to search for God or goddess?
Yes. My mother raised me for the first 4 years of my life in a Lutheran church. And then she became very evangelical Christian in her own sense of way. And the principles and the values she instilled in me, the basic 10 commandments and virtues of Jesus, and that sort of biblical wisdom was the foundation of me to seek out different pathos of understanding reality and this etheric connection that feels really important for me to establish in this lifetime. I always had a little seeker archetype within me.
Yay, sister. I hear you on that one. Okay, so you're in your apartment, you have this vision and you're told she is God.
Yes.
And what did that Okay, so finish what you were saying. I'm curious around what you thought of that.
Yes. And it was such a clear message that I said, okay, all right, let me just play with this. Let me just relax into this. Let me start to research, feminine God. I don't know what a Google search, but something along those lines. And around the same time, I also was, for the first time in my life, playing with a tarot, and I was pulling the High Priestess card all the time. And that was also the first time I've ever heard the word priestess consciously. Of course, I could have heard this subconsciously in different lifetimes. But when I saw the High Priestess card, and I felt such a resonance when I was looking up the High Priestess meaning of having the power of discernment and the power to receive information, but also make a choice based on divine impulse, that just resonated with me. It resonated so supremely that I thought, what priestess? Let me just search more about this priestess. And I found all these books about priestesses. I found these teachers teaching the priestess way. I was part of a woo-woo entrepreneurial group from Marie Forleo's B School back in the day when Facebook groups were just beginning to start in 2014 or so. And so someone posted about the priestess there, and these synchronicities started to turn a leaf and turn themselves online for my awareness to start collecting things.
Which is how it works when you're getting close to your actual authentic soul path. It keeps showing up in multiple forms and ways until you're like, all right, I'll look at it.
Yes, and creativity has been such a part of my life. And at the time, I was studying Butoh, which is a Japanese form of, you could say, postmodern dance and theater that's about death and grief and moving through loss and coming into reconciliation in the body with these emotions and with these powers that we receive when loss has been revealed, has been activated in our life, and how to be in reverence with it and how to move through it with the body and to express whatever story wants to be expressed. And so I was already in this sort of portal of death mysteries in my dance and movement and performance art background. And so when I turned the knob even more and saw, oh, there's something called a shamanic priestess, I thought, oh, another big ding. And then when I looked further into shamanic priestessing, I saw that the oracle priestess was also another name for the shamanic priestess.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yes.
that's interesting.
And the two words, the priestess and the oracle priestess, it was like a cosmic bingo for me. And everything started to change in my life rapidly, so uncomfortably. And at the meantime, all of this is going on. At the beginning of my study sati, my mother was losing her memory and rapidly experiencing early onset dementia. And so often when we wake up to these strong feminine archetypes, the priestess, the oracle, the seeress, the prophetessa, whatever it is, there's often some relationship with our mother, our grandmother, or matriarchal lineage that is being very influenced at the moment.
Wow.
And so
I can see that. I can feel that. Yep.
Becomes a catalyst for even more awakening, integration, you know, that devastation and that despair often is a precursor to a great sense of awakening to our authenticity, our essence, nature, whatever you like to call it. And so I was in both fields. I was going deep into the realms of the sacred feminine, of the priestess. I was beginning to see my life in the lens of me coming into terms of my power as a sacred woman. I never would have referred to myself as a sacred woman. Like, this concept felt superfluous, and no one in my life would ever refer to any woman as sacred. So for me to begin to be in community and communion with priestesses and the greater energy of goddess was such a balm to my soul when my own flesh and blood mother was checking out of this planet in a really unusual, complicated way.
Wow. Wow. So as I'm listening to you, it feels like there was just this grand invitation to just go in, just almost incubate with the new knowledge and what was coming through. And sometimes it takes really an earthquake in a relationship, because that's, that's where our heartstrings are being pulled the most, is our relationships. And usually when there's a shakeup or a tragedy or a trauma in one of our relationships, we have to circle back. And that fact that it was your mother, like you said, the representation of the matrilineal, connection that we have, like, I, yes, the foremothers, if you will, the grandmothers, um, usually it's an invitation to, like, hey, we've got our eyes on you, and here's this shakeup in your relationship with um your mortal mother. So here comes cosmic mother. Right?
Exactly. And that's when I felt like I could receive the love and receive the sense of care and support that my own flesh and blood mother wasn't able to provide for me, right? And so that great nurturance, that great embrace, the arms of being received by a female archetype, a female image of the divine, not the male archetype, not that image, that symbol that my subconscious had known God to be for most of my life up until then, but to receive her love and nourishment was just the most powerful thing. And why I'm so passionate about bridging the veils of the mystical feminine into the earthly feminine, and the importance and the necessity of being able to ground this divine energy we as women have, but also men have the access to the divine mother, to goddess, to their feminine energy as well. But there's something really, really special about having a womb and having the ability, most women at least, to be able to create life.
Yes. And you talked about how important it was for you to have creativity as a means to feel like yourself, to feel, and I know that's connected to womb energy and the sacral chakra and all of that. For me, having given birth to a lot of children and having lost as many children as I gave birth to be honest, through miscarriage, having a cesarean section, just all of these really trying physical and emotional, spiritual confrontations with that chakra for myself. I would have never thought of myself as a high creative, but what I'm learning is it didn't come in the same form. I may not be like painting and drawing, but when I cut that off, when I go through seasons where I have no regenerative capacity. I'm literally not, I'm not myself. I'm sort of pandering to serve and do all these things in my outer world, but sourcing the creativity and coming into my own womb wisdom, if you will, and asking what it is that I want. Don't you feel like desire kind of lives in that chakra as well? And we're always just like pushing it down. Um, what was your life station then? Like I know you're still single. Were you single then? I mean, did you have a relationship with a significant other, or
Oh
sometimes that
no, I
can
was,
thin your energy way out if you're trying to come into cosmic mother. I was separated from my husband when this all came to me. And I really, truly believe, I don't believe you have to get divorced or be single or separate, ladies that are listening, that are married or what have you, to get this. But it was almost like my psychic rift was the separation from my husband. Yours was your mother. And it sounds like, that it's like, where am I attaching now? You know, what,
yes,
what is my sustenance? Where is my life source? And it's
yes,
not exterior, but I believed that it was for
yes,
so long.
yes. I was very much a virgin priestess, as they say, one unto herself most of my life. So no significant relationships or intimacy. I had to move through my own avoidant style of attachment to understand what was going on there. And there was something in my spiritual practices up until then. So before I had this vision of goddess and what I now interpret to be Kali, is that I was in a more Zen style of yogic meditation practice. I was learning from Pema Chodron. I was going to Vipassana retreats. And there's not much talk about desire in those traditions. In fact, it's in the invitation is to relinquish your desires.
Yeah, isn't the Buddhist tradition, because I know Pema Chodron talks about releasing attachments. That's all Buddhist. Like, don't get too attached to anything. It's like, what? I have kids and like there's things. Like, yeah, desire
Yes,
is not on the high priority list there with that tradition.
yes, yes. And the priestess lineages, and especially the tradition that I'm a part of now, that is more of a tantric Shakti tradition, it is the total embrace of the paradox of reality, the paradox of having desires, and also the wisdom to not be attached to those desires, to not be attached to the material realm, but also maintain your desire, maintain your relationship as a householder in these realms. I was essentially learning from non-householder yogis and spiritual practitioners. So I was very much just egoically trying to just detach myself with my needs, with not needing money, not needing a relationship, not needing fill in the blank, my creativity, my business to bloom, whatever I was pursuing. So when the goddess Key turned online for me, it was
like,
just,
hey, honey, guess what?
she's like, it's time to play. And it's going to be the most mind-blowing play ever because of this deep relationship to imagery. In studying from the Priestess arts, I mentored under a wonderful clairvoyant priestess, Marguerite Rigoyoso, and her Seven Sisters Mystery School. And I learned so much from her and her teachings, not only about the priestesses, the Melissa, the bee priestesses, and how that for thousands of years, women cross-culturally have used substances to alter their consciousness and to heighten their awareness, whether it's mead or cannabis or entheogenic herbs of all different forms. It's been a part of women's sacred rites, rites. And also
That's also been under attack by patriarchal systems for all of this time, because what does that create? If a woman is in desire or in clarity and steps into her power, what does that even mean for the patriarchy, right? It's really confrontational to them.
Yes, confrontational is a great word to say it. Yes, yes. But it was from this understanding of her story, if you will, that I had no idea about, of just pursuing the possibility of me getting my master's in women's spirituality at some of the West Coast schools. It was just my desire to go deep into what I felt like was the biggest secret of my life and the biggest secret on the planet. And I think there was a part of me reading the Da Vinci Code as a teenager,
Yeah.
started to pick up the Magdalene. And I remember having conversations.
Good old Dan Brown. He has no idea what he did for us with Mary Magdalene by opening
No
that up.
idea. No idea. And I remember being in friction and in conversations with atheist friends that would think, oh, this Mary Magdalene stuff, Brooke, really, you just need to get over yourself. And there was a part of me that was like, no, there's something divine and pure and lovely about this feminine sacred energy that I had not touched before. So by touching these herstories, these, just the cross-culturally, these different pathos to women's sacred power, whether it was the orishas, the oracles, the priestesses, the yoginis in the Eastern tradition, I was awakening.
Bikinis.
Bikinis, yes. Thank you. Akshis. I was awakening the symbology and the imagery I needed in order for my subconscious mind to really take myself to an integrated level and not feel like I was just living in this frequency. I needed to fully let it sink into my subconscious mind. And by practicing more clairvoyant type of psychic practices, visualization, meeting different forms of the mother of goddesses in different ways and connecting to the different octaves and expressions, the goddess has 10,000 names. She has 10,000 templates of reality in her expression. Like just the creativity just lit my soul on fire and continues to do so today, and gives me that ultimate cosmic validation and that permission for me to lean into this realm to feed my soul at the deepest level.
I love it. I would have never made the connection of myth, archetypes, especially some of the more far-fetched, let's just say Kali, for those of you, it might spark some remembrance in some way, shape, or form of you seeing her. I don't know how many arms she has. She's got a man's, scalp, basically her head in one hand, and she's got weapons and her tongue is sticking out. And I would have never thought of that as spiritual, right? Until I was going through my own dark night and I felt the invitation to dip into that energy for my sovereignty. It has been things like Wonder Woman, Joan of Arc, Mary Magdalene. I have my own council of 7, and some of them are completely fictitious, non-historical figures, right? And some of and that's still powerful, because what it does with imagery, like you're saying, in visualization, is it gives me something corporeal to attach to, as opposed to something so esoteric that I just need the image of it. I need Joan of
Yes.
Arc with her sword in the air, with her hair chopped off, racing on her horse into battle, right? Um, so this symbology, the patterns, the symbols, the metaphors, the just all the archetypal power of claiming your own. There's a reason you're attracted. And let's talk about that for a minute. Because I've learned this as I've been running my Stand Speak Shine school, because I have women choose their council of 7 that they consult, right? It's kind of like, they morph in and out of these characters to get advice, but really they know the answer. They just need to attach to the image of that person to give them the answer. But don't you feel like whatever archetypes we're drawn to are like aspects of ourselves that speak to our soul path and our mission?
Absolutely. In the most profound way. I don't know, being invested in astrology, and especially beginning in archetypal astrology, I really don't know any other way to go deep into the subconscious mind and to give prompts to myself and prompts to my clients to meet these similar, frequencies, if you will, of these certain expressions of the divine feminine, and be able to integrate those so that the identity is integrated. And so there's an invitation to be free from limitations of the identity. There's often a place where we realize we have to relinquish our identity before, goddess came into our life, before the priestess, the oracle, whatever,
Yes.
female, feminine, divine mysteries. And so once that identity has been let go, you can feel a little porous, a little ultra porous, unsafely porous, with things moving through you.
And the old programming would have been like, that's like you set yourself wide open to deception, to nefarious entities. I mean, there's all that old programming religiously around like Satan and evil spirits, and like you can't let go of yourself as a certain way. We'll just say it, maybe even like a devout follower, which is very lauded and very held up as the ideal, honestly, when you're raised in religious environment. So to go from an obedient follower with a sacred masculine archetype, or God, Jesus, whatever. And I have, of course, we have nothing against that. It's just that's the only way. It is the way. And to have so many women that I talk to, and you've just also reinforced this, saying that they keep having Mary Magdalene come to them, and just the image of her in their minds, and the goddess of their understanding, and all of these powerful warrior type goddesses, whether it was Greek or what have you, that they keep seeing. And I'm like, well, that's how it works. Like, how else is it going to work? You're not going to be sitting in Sunday school and hear about any of this. It's going to have to come through the culture somehow and it get to you. There's really no other basis for it to come and find you.
Mother Mary is, when I talk to Catholic women or formerly Catholic women, Mother Mary gave them the priestess codes way before they received it in any other way. And my mother was raised Catholic, actually. And I often wonder if there was something subconsciously I picked up from that. My Aunt Mary,
Well, okay, you're speaking my priestess's language when you say picked up the codes, but for our listeners who may not be familiar with that, can you explain that a little bit as much as you can in practical terms, what that means?
Yes, the subconscious mind contains all memories. It contains hundreds and thousands of all different memories, and memories from our childhood, memories even in the womb, and memories even pre-womb. And so epigenetically, you could say there's something that we can tune in to our ancestral DNA specifically, that when we do strategically and intentionally and safely, there's often subtle revelations that begin to reveal themselves in the life. It's not a process to rush to decode your feminine lineage or to force it or to project that this must be what it is. It's something to really receive, to relax into, to stay open and curious to, which is essentially the oracle path as well, and to just allow things to stir up into the field of your awareness of, synchronicities of people walking into your life, a random email, you overhear a conversation, all these little things that can tune us into, our guidance system, and also places where we can heal.
That's beautiful. And these activations, sometimes we call them, right? Like you may have this template in you for priestess or any of a number of other archetypes, roles, what have you. And it takes an outside agent that it could be a teacher, it could be a person, a group, a book, a train. I mean, it's so different for all of us, but it takes an out, just like this is epigenetics anyway. Like you could have the template for mental illness and it can't express unless an outside stressor activates it. So it's the same for your light codes, and these, they're not going to get activated until you find your people, you find your soul tribe, you follow the red thread, right? And the breadcrumbs until it's like, oh, and then you start to come alive, and sometimes you start to break down. And I want to talk about that. When you started to really embody some of these aspects of the priestess and the oracle, we haven't really finished talking about your mom. I imagine that was a huge thing, but did you also notice other things that were coming in, not necessarily to sabotage it, but to galvanize you onto this new path? Like did things really ramp up for you confrontationally?
Yeah. Yes. It was understanding power, right? Because when we entered sacred female power, this path of the priestess, we're going to be initiated into responsibility and integrity with our soul and who we are. So the responsibility was the tumultuous part in me taking on this role and understanding my power over, my power under, and just power dynamics in general with my masculine energy, and also the manifestation of masculine energy, be it men, be it money. I define money for women as masculine energy, and be it God or a male form of power. And so I was thrown around the barrel a couple years. I was still being thrown around a barrel, I think, when I met you, Cherie. And
it looked like you were being thrown around a barrel.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. But this understanding of power, and also the understanding of any spiritual ego that I picked up from this new frequency, this new perhaps identity, this new self-image. I prefer to say I relate to the self-image of a priestess more so than I identify as a priestess, just because I find that the self-image is what makes me come alive. And the identity is something that previously, at least for me, has gotten me into trouble with my own integrity. of seeing things through my spiritual ego. And
Yeah.
that's not just arrogancy, it's also a sense of self-deprivation of, because I'm going on this new journey as a sacred woman, I'm not allowed to have money. I'm not allowed to charge the fees I want to charge. I should be doing free healings. I should be doing free priestessing. All these things based on this spiritual archetype that I didn't have formally before.
Yeah, it's the antithesis of abundance, really, if you break it down. And mother is about fullness and about abundance and the all. I do go through the same thing. And I still find myself like, oh, what is my relationship to feminine wealth creation? And what are the old masculine paradigms or dynamics that I'm talking toxic masculine. I mean, like, I love how you put money with the masculine energy, because it is. But I'm glad you also brought up spiritual ego, because I was raised to have a spiritual ego, and I didn't recognize that that's what it was. And it wasn't until, because it's like, you're special, you're God's chosen, you have this truth that no one else has, and I think a lot of religions perpetuate that kind of an ideology, and people attach to that identity, and it can feel judgy. It can feel like you're better than, and you don't recognize it until you start to unpack, like, wait a minute, like, I'm all about oneness right now. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because if somebody comes, if you have this experience where you're like, I want to embody the priestess, that's so self-honoring and so honoring of the divine. It is not self-aggrandizement or ego. It is like the holiest way, if that's an archetype you resonate with, but it's one of the holiest ways that you can walk this planet as a female. And you're nodding. So what would you add to that?
Visibility,
Mm,
your divinity as a sacred woman.
mm.
It has
I
been
told you my paradox with that.
Yes.
It's like I both crave it and fear it. It's like finding that middle path with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. As the priestess, as the oracle is the middle path. She's the representation of being able to go into the unseen. So not only to the spirit world, but also to retreat into darkness, retreat into the cosmic womb symbolically, i.e., go to the ocean for a few days, do your own thing, take a few years off, go on sabbatical, have your life in that way, and also be in relationship, in divine service to your people. So being in that relationship with the immaterial and the material, the unseen and the seen, and opening yourself up to be able to hold both of this, right? The paradox of it all, while remaining in integrity with who you know yourself to be.
I recently listened to somebody who talked about, like, their whole spiritual path, or they believe the highest spiritual path is to hold paradox. We're not taught that. We're not taught to integrate our shadows. We're not taught to hold them both. We're taught to pray the shadow away, or fast it away, or worship it away, or self-sacrifice it away, when actually it's our power. And that is the dark feminine. I'm sure you would agree. Okay, so with the visibility, say that quote again about what you said about visibility is, if you can remember.
I find visibility to be the sacred divine path of the priestess, and that to really embody the truth of who you are. And if you resonate with these certain signifiers, right? These certain images, the oracle, the Prius, the priestess, the shamaness, whatever that is, to not deny it, to not to just take it away, to always be in integrity with it, even if that means you're doing your grocery shopping, but you still have some sense of your connection to your body and connection to spirit, even if it's just like 10 to 20%, right? It's just still acknowledging the way that we walk, the way that we carry our body, that we're carrying ourselves with this sense of reverence. And that is simply enough to be visible as a priestess or oracle. You don't have to
have to be holding the microphone or be all over social media. I happen to like that stuff. So I think I told you before, hand me a microphone and it's all over. And when you did my Vedic astrology chart, you're like, oh, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, a couple of the words you said really resonated with me. One was integrity. And the other one, I think you didn't actually say, but I heard, and that was dignity.
Oh, yes.
It's important. It's been important for me to not have an air of superiority as much as an air of dignity. And in that, being able to be of service when I'm told to move. I very much relate to having to have times of retreat. I've traveled by myself a lot. Even though I have a family and a business, I find that I need to be in that cosmic womb and just be, I spend a lot of my energy ruminating on how I can serve humanity and my family.
Yeah.
That I don't often give that same, at least on a regular basis, that same kind of dedication to my own needs. And so I'm grateful that I got the setup in my life where I can do that and have and feel support in that. I'm going to Mount Shasta for a week by myself in December. Actually, this will air in January, so I'll have already gone by the time this airs. But just those connection points to coming back into, if I'm going to be visible, I need to shore up reserves so that I have the right kind of energy in a public domain.
Yes.
And so do you want to speak to that as we kind of wrap this around? What have you found? And well, let's back up just a little bit. So Priestess Brooke is very different than Priestess Cherie, and Priestess Cherie is very different than Priestess Jane, or whatever. There's not one. And that's what we're taught, is that there are these parameters, right? Or there's this one way, and it homogenizes the crud out of everything. So I just wanted to say that, and I know that you agree with me there, but coming back into well, I know you talked about visualization. You talked about how important imagery was to you. I'm assuming you do meditation and yoga. What are some other things that really get you into this, like, this is who I am. This is how I want to show up on this planet. Here's how I want this oracle, gifting to come out and through me. How do you set the stage for that, to walk like that on the planet?
The first thing that comes to heart is the boon of growing up as a dancer. And since I was 2.5, I danced. And that relationship to my body and that natural sensitivity with space and my body in relationship to space, my sensitivity of different muscles and different parts of my body coming online or, receding, whatever that is, and just playing with the soma of body as oracle. A lot of my just most profound and inspiring client work that I do with others is that I get to practice inquiry and inquire their bodies to share the messages that want to be witnessed, that want to be heard. And I believe that the body is an oracle, that actually, as much as we can go into developing our higher chakras and sit in meditation and desire to develop these siddhi powers of manifestation and all these things, the feminine divine path is the body path. It's the whole body path. And it's especially the womb, the yoni, the vulva, all of this divine energy.
All those parts we were taught to
Yes.
reject and to protect. And yeah, there's so much around the sexuality piece we haven't even talked about. But yeah, okay, so keep going. So the body as oracle, the body will tell you, and you took me through a somatic exercise that was really powerful. Um, and I've always loved the idea of tuning in to receive your own embodied wisdom. I guess the question too, and then we can go on with some of the things you do. You said dance, but movement is huge. I find that in the times that I am not moving, like physiologically moving, and that's what came through when you did that somatic exercise with me. My gut brain, my womb, whatever. I think you said belly. You were talking to my belly. It's like belly just wanted the rest of me to know that I had to move if I wanted to write. And I had to commit to that, like that guttural, like, yep, that's it, dude. I get it. Like my whole body knew that after that. Yeah.
Writing is such a masculine practice, and the templates of strong female writers, especially strong female memoirists, they were very much cut off from the feminine energy. And so in order, for me to really step into my writing power, that writing thread that I have of creativity, it was to do the backwards thing. It was to not sit at my desk. It was actually to move energy, move my body, do Pilates every morning, even if it's just 15 minutes. That these little practices, they just add up over time, and they strengthen the core and they strengthen the central channel, and bring so much consensus in what I like to call inner congruency with your body. Not only your belly, your heart, and your head, but your whole body is more apt, more willing to see things that maybe a part of you doesn't want to see. It's more willing to go places creatively that maybe the ego is saying, oh, not yet, no, not a good time, must not do that. When the body is feeling strong and content, then all these other things start to reveal themselves. And I definitely am a firm believer for all priestesses to receive body work regularly.
Yes.
As healing through
totally
sacred touch.
Yes.
Has been a profound part of my journey, and also sensual healing too, which is for another conversation another day. But right now, I'll just have to say that I'm wearing my jade egg, and that too is a part of my body connectivity practice.
So cool. I love all of these touch points of just, marrying sort of like the visceral with the etheric, and how, you can't have one without the other, but we've been told for so long to deny the physicality, that that's not how spirit moves and works, that that's to be a vehicle that could take us down dangerous roads. So I've got that programming really heavy in me. I find that, the somatic piece, the sensory, the sensual senses, those portals for helping us to come alive. So I love it. And I'm assuming nature is big for you, because when I look at your Instagram and I feel like, yeah, because that is right. That is part of the priestess mystery, is connecting really powerfully to the earth and anchoring into her wisdom.
Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that. It's been raining the past couple of days, so I haven't been out so much in nature here in Asheville. But my first oracle guide was a grandmother willow tree, I called her growing up. And it was the most intuitive relationship I ever had with
Like when you were a little girl?
Yeah, when I was a little girl, we had a willow tree, and it was just, I knew there was healing. I would lay my back against her and just receive restoration during, the classic American dysfunctional family, cops in the driveway, sheriff every month type of thing. Half my family being ex-cons at one point.
Oh, Brooke, wow.
But I still was able to connect, and it was the nature part. Not only the dance was such a huge part that I could just grieve and cry and rage, sacred rage. My God, I got that really flushed out of my system early on, I had a lot of anger that I had to move through my body in order to accept reality, in order to accept my mother, accept different levels of consciousness. I don't really forgive. My body doesn't really like forgiving. It doesn't feel open. It feels like I'm forcefully willing something. It feels very masculine to forgive someone or something, but to accept, to just accept, it feels like I can exhale. It feels like my body can just hold it all and hold that paradox and be okay with it.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, Brooke, I feel like we could go off on so many other pieces of this because it's a lot. How can our listeners find you online?
Absolutely. It's the oracular state of being and communication. I totally understand. So listeners can find me at my Instagram, my full name, Brooke Underwood Official. I also have a YouTube that is called Embodied Light and Astrology. And on my YouTube, you can actually find channelings that I do. I channel the Council of the Fae, very much in relationship to the fairy realms and the Western pagan tradition. And also, you know, the Fae and the elementals, they show up not just in Western culture, but in different forms of Davic beings and so on in the Eastern traditions. And so you can witness me channeling as well on my YouTube.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow. Well, I'm grateful that you're in my life and that we've reconnected since we met at Pacifica. And I just see you as this. I remember you telling me about Jumana being embodied, and I see you that way. So beautiful full circle, coming back into like, hey, whatever you had to walk through and you got tumbled or whatever you said, um, it definitely has brought you into a space of just a very serene, wise energy. So thank you for today, and thank you for you.
Thank you so much, Sherry.